I have something crazy to share with you today. The Big Bang disproves atheism.
Reality check, it doesn't. Hey everyone, JL here, and welcome back to Bridge the Divide, where I examine irrational beliefs, the irrational behaviors that follow, and how, with education, rationality, and reason, we can bridge the societal divides that they create. My goal as an atheist content creator and debater is to expose how theistic ideologies are irrational at their core and how they often lead to irrational behaviors. Theist positions usually boil down to arguments from incredulity, they can't see it any other way, arguments from ignorance, they don't know any other way, or appeals to emotion, that it's true because they want it to be true. Generally, that last one is invoked because holding on to the belief provides some utility to the person's life, enabling them to get out of bed in the morning, to persevere through hardships, envision greater meaning for their own lives, or even eschew the greater responsibilities in their lives for their actions and their inactions. More often than not, however, my interactions with theists online descend into delivering scientific lessons, with a great amount of energy being spent in attempting to analogize concepts so that they can be readily understood.
Okay, one last time. These are small, but the ones out there are far away.
This current video, brought to you by the folks over at Stint TBF, is just one more example of scientific ignorance and incredulity.
How is it that in the world today, the Big Bang is seen as something that fits right into the idea that God doesn't exist?
Wow, just gonna be deceptive right out the gate, aren't you? So this holier-than-thou wannabe named Alex cannot believe that anyone who accepts Big Bang cosmology would not automatically associate it with his God. But the incredulity with which he asks this question is actually pretty telling. The intention here is to anchor the less educated viewer to the notion that the concepts of God and the Big Bang, while not mutually exclusive, are necessarily correlated. It's a deceptive move because there's no evidence to support this conclusion.
Now, when I say the words Big Bang, almost everyone thinks of something different based on the background in which they grew up.
This is really only an issue for people who have never taken a course on cosmology and only receive their information about the Big Bang from people who are equally uneducated.
So for this video, when I say the words Big Bang, I am simply referring to the start of the universe.
First mistake. Asserting that the Big Bang is the start of anything other than the observability of our universe is baseless. There are only two reasons why someone would make this claim. The first comes from a misunderstanding of the Big Bang cosmological model in its entirety, which makes no assertions about anything before the Planck epoch. The second is an attempt to capitalize on the lack of education of others to further a particular agenda. Which one is it, you may ask? More on that later.
I'm in no way referring to evolution or anything else that some people may say came after the Big Bang.
I honestly don't know what's weirder, that Alex had to point out he's not talking about evolution in a video with Big Bang in the title, or that he honestly thought he could slip that little creationist dig against evolution by anyone.
As we look at the start of the universe, or the Big Bang,
yeah, well, the Big Bang is not the start of the universe, Alex, no matter what your creationist writers tell you to say.
You have to realize that for years, atheists have been trying to stay away from the evidence that the universe has a definite beginning. The reason being, they know that if there is a definite beginning to the universe, they have a huge problem.
Atheists do not run from the Big Bang. We accept it as the cosmological model. This argument that atheists don't accept God as the cause of the universe because we're so afraid of dealing with a creator is just a straw man, erected to avoid dealing with the actual atheist argument, that there is insufficient evidence to support the conclusion of a God.
I mean, think about it. If the universe began to exist, there had to be something outside of the universe that started it.
This is but one of many hypotheses about what came before the Planck epoch, but as stated before, there was not enough evidence to justify any one conclusion.
Scientifically, we know that before the universe was here, there was nothing that existed. That's right.
That's wrong. Claiming that something came from nothing is logically incoherent. No one other than creationists claim the universe came from nothing. This is just a dishonest projection of their own position, claiming that God created the universe out of nothing.
No thing existed. That means no space, no time, no matter, no energy, pure nothingness.
Alex, it's redundant to say spaceless and timeless. If you actually understood physics, you would know that when you say one, you directly imply the other. That's why it's called space-time. Out of space-time would be atemporal, meaning no time. And I hope that Alex understands the logical contradiction of saying that a thing exists for no time.
And guess what can be proven scientifically? A universe like we see today, full of time, space, matter, and energy, cannot come from nothing.
But this is what you claim, that God created the universe out of nothing. Atheists don't claim that something came from nothing. We usually say that something came from something, but you can't justify that that prior something is a God.
As the former atheist Dr. Francis Collins wrote, the Big Bang cries out for a divine explanation.
Alex is quoting geneticist Francis S. Collins from his book, The Language of God. For those who might not know, Francis Collins was the lead geneticist at the Human Genome Project, and he recently retired from his position as director of the National Institutes of Health at Bethesda. Yes, Collins once called himself an atheist, but even after his conversion to Christianity, at least he's still intellectually honest. According to his book, the one that Alex just quoted from, Collins has flatly rejected the notion of intelligent design and young Earth creation. Collins actually explained his position in a 2010 New York Times article after he was misrepresented by the intelligent design documentary Expelled. He acknowledges and accepts evolution based upon the evidence and the predictive modeling. Collins also stated in a 2006 interview with Salon that he believes no one could be converted to Christianity through argument and reason alone, but that conversion requires a leap of faith. And he's also the guy who claims that an observation of a waterfall that had frozen into 3 separate ice columns was a sign of the Holy Trinity, thus leading to his full conversion the following morning. So yeah, just because a belief has some sort of physiological or psychological utility does not mean it represents reality. And just because a person is an expert in one field doesn't make them an expert in all fields.
It forces us to the conclusion that nature has a definite beginning. I cannot see how nature could have created itself. Only a supernatural force that is outside of space and time could have done that.
While Collins was essentially using the terms nature and universe interchangeably, which is a semantic issue for another time, what he was actually trying to convey is a little strange. The idea that the universe created the universe may seem a little odd on its face, but it's not that weird of a concept. Think of an apple. Now think of the statement, an apple creates an apple. You can easily see how this statement may seem false on the surface, but is actually true when you critically examine it. And that's because the cycle from apple 1 to apple 2 contains many more steps than just the apples themselves. Apples contain seeds, which then produce trees, which then in turn produce more apples. There is even a hypothesis that a similar cycle could apply to the universe itself. We just can't be certain what all the middle steps might be. But what we can say, and often say, is that there is not enough evidence to get you to a God. Collins' inability to see how anything could do that other than a supernatural force is just an argument from incredulity.
Whoa, hold on there. Dr. Francis Collins is saying that the Big Bang, or the reality of the definite beginning of the universe, cries out for a divine explanation that can only be a supernatural force that is outside of space and time. So I wonder if that's why Dr. Francis Collins is a former atheist.
Just because Collins had a reason to convert to Christianity doesn't mean it was a good reason. Collins admitted to his leap of faith and that he didn't come to the conclusion of Christianity based on any specific evidence. He did it because of an argument from incredulity and an appeal to emotion.
So you see now that the Big Bang has been proven both philosophically and scientifically without any reasonable doubt.
Yeah, no one said otherwise.
There are only 2 possible explanations for the beginning of the universe.
This should be good.
The first being that nothing created everything. And yes, that contradicts all science and logic.
And we all agree with you. So why would someone posit it as a possibility when they know it's false from the jump?
It's a trap!
But the second explanation is this: a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, powerful, and intelligent being created the universe. And yes, that is the definition of God.
There it is. To clarify, what they've done here is another informal fallacy. The two choices presented are something from nothing or something from God. But we know something can't come from nothing, so the first choice is automatically incorrect. That leaves only the remaining option, something from God. This is a false dichotomy. They are erroneously limiting the options that are available to us in the premise. There is actually a third option, something from something, where that prior something is not a God, but merely a continuation of natural process.
And even though that may sound crazy to our finite brain, that does not contradict science or logic.
It doesn't contradict science because it makes no absolute claims about something for which there is no evidence to support. But it does contradict logic because your argument was demonstrated to be a false dichotomy, which makes it logically fallacious.
The reality of the Big Bang actually leaves atheism spinning on its head with no logical, scientific, or natural explanation.
Yeah, no. Asserting a cause without evidence is a theist problem, not an atheist one. And not making a claim until the evidence is in is just being intellectually honest. Something that these people are decidedly not.
And because they simply can't admit that God is the better explanation for the beginning of the universe, because, well, they don't want to believe in God.
To admit something implies a confession of something to be true. Atheists can't admit this because they don't hold the God claim to be true. What this was a sly reference to Romans 1:20 and a total misrepresentation of atheism itself. Now, beyond this point in the video is just more misrepresentation, references back to the false dichotomy, and bad argumentation. So let's leave this Pure Flix mouthpiece here for a moment and dive into the real darkness I found hiding behind this little video. And it starts with Stint TBF. Stint TBF is a channel hosted by members of the Short-Term Ministry Internship, an internship of the Todd Becker Foundation. Founded in 2005, the Todd Becker Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Kearney, Nebraska. It was started by Keith Becker after the tragic loss of his brother Todd in an alcohol-related traffic accident.
Constable, official vocab guidelines state we no longer refer to these incidents as accidents, then as collisions.
Right.
Sorry, alcohol-related traffic collision. At first glance, this may seem pretty innocuous. A grieving brother channeled his pain into a positive direction. But as we know, it's never that simple. The mission of the Todd Becker Foundation, as stated on their website, is to motivate high school students to discover their potentials and ultimately discover themselves by placing their faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. But just above that statement is where I think many may find a real problem. Above their mission statement, they state that we bring the life-changing Word of God to high school youth across the Midwest through high school assemblies and evening outreaches. That's right, the Todd Becker Foundation focuses on bringing the indoctrinating practices of Christianity directly to students right there in school. And as you probably remember, school assemblies are generally mandatory because they take place during attendance hours, meaning students have no choice but to attend them. Potential violations of the First Amendment aside, I also feel it necessary to point out that Keith's story that he shares with students about the events leading up to his brother's untimely death is also pretty suspect. In an interview with the Laurel Advocate, he extols on the ramifications of underage drinking, premarital sex, and peer pressure, all things that I think are great to talk about with kids. If only he didn't wrap them up in an ignorant blanket of how pornography and premarital sex were the driving influences that corrupted his once virtuous brother, led him to alcohol abuse, and his untimely death. And all while simultaneously absolving every authority figure in his brother's life of any culpability in regards to Todd's increasingly self-destructive behavior. And it gets worse, because I found that the Todd Becker Foundation counts evangelical Christian Kirk Cameron as one of its biggest friends and supporters. They even have a quote from Kirk right there on their website. America's public schools are a battleground between truth and lies. That's why ministries like the Todd Becker Foundation are so important. They're going into these public schools, correcting the lies with biblical truth, the highest love for all people, and rescuing lost souls to Jesus Christ. Real nice message there, Kurt. It couldn't possibly have any negative repercussions. And we finally arrive at the ugly truth, that just beneath the surface of silly arguments and baseless claims lies a very real threat to the separation of church and state. With people like Cameron dog-whistling to theocratic fundamentalists that schools teach lies, and institutions like the Todd Becker Foundation platforming him, supporting his message, and in turn delivering that message to captive high school audiences, all while being funded by tax-free donations, is, I would think, cause for some real concern. Especially when the internet provides virtually the same level of access to students across the nation. Remember that 90s CW poster boy Alex Downs spouting out anti-science in the vid? He's not just some actor or even just a fresh-faced flunky making a video. He's the high school coordinator for the Todd Becker Foundation, which means it's his job to specifically target students. Which is why, as citizens of this incredible country, we need to remain vigilant against insidious threats to our constitutionally protected rights. Because freedom of religion includes freedom from religion. Thank you for joining me for another Bridge the Divide. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell for notifications. Also, if you dig scary movies, be sure to check out me and my filmmaker friends over at the Week in Horror podcast, now in our 3rd season. All the links you need to support me here or over at our podcast are in the description below. Thank you again for your continued support, and as always, be safe, be excellent to each other, and together we can bridge the divide. Remember that CW poster boy, Alex Down? Remember that 6th member of a boy band that never got picked up, Alex Down? Remember that extra on Dawson's Creek, Alex Down? Remember that Degrassi High reject, Alex Down? Remember that Varsity Blues 3rd stringer, Alex Down? Remember that first victim in an episode of Buffy, Alex Down?